The place you feel most triggered is usually where you are not being honest. Not about other people, about you. That's a difficult thing to hold because it goes against how most people interpret their reactions. When something hits, the focus goes outward. What was said, what was done, what felt off. The mind starts organizing around the other person, trying to make sense of it from the outside in. But if you stay with the reaction without moving away from it too quickly, there's usually something else there. Something you noticed before the reaction fully formed. It's quieter than the emotion, but it comes first. A moment where something did not sit right, where you registered a shift, where something in you recognized a pattern or a tone or a dynamic that was not aligned. And instead of staying with that, you moved past it. You explained it. You gave it context. You made space for it in a way that did not require you to change anything. That's where the split begins. You know something, but you don't act on it, or you don't fully acknowledge it. So it stays in the background, unresolved, while you continue forward. The reaction comes later, and when it does, it feels like it's about the moment you're in, but it's not isolated to that moment. It is connected to everything that was not addressed earlier. That's why it often feels disproportionate. Not because it is, but because it's carrying more of a charge than what is visible on the surface. Most people try to regulate that reaction without looking at what it's tied to. They calm themselves down, they reframe it, they try to be reasonable. They bring it back into something manageable, something logical. And that can be useful in certain situations. But if the underlying recognition is still being avoided, the tension doesn't go anywhere. It just gets quieter with more density until something brings it back again. There is a difference between being triggered and being misaligned. A trigger can come from the past. It can be a reaction that isn't fully connected to what is happening in the present. But misalignment is current. It's direct. It doesn't require interpretation. You can feel it in the moment before anything has to escalate. And if that misalignment is not acknowledged, it does not disappear. It stays active beneath your behavior. That's where a lot of confusion comes from, not from not knowing, but from knowing something and continuing in a way that does not match it. When you start looking at your reactions this way, the focus shifts. You're not just asking, why did that bother me? You are asking, what did I already sense before I reacted? that question changes the entire orientation. Because now you're not trying to solve the reaction, you are tracing it back to the point where something became clear and was not followed or honored. This isn't about blaming yourself for your responses. It is about recognizing where you've been out of alignment with your own awareness. And that recognition is not always comfortable. Necessary, but not always comfortable. Because it moves the idea that you were just reacting to something external. It shows you where you participated, where you stayed in something after it stopped feeling right, where you adjusted your behavior to maintain stability, even when that stability was not actually present or working. That's the part most people don't want to look at. Not because it's wrong, but because it requires a different kind of responsibility. Not responsibility for what someone else did, but responsibility for how long you stayed connected to something you already sensed was not aligned. Once you see that clearly, your reactions start to change. Not because you're trying to control them, but because you are no longer overriding the earlier signal anymore. You are not waiting for the reaction to tell you something is off. You are recognizing it when it first appears. And that removes a lot of the intensity and charge. Not because you're suppressing anything, but because you are no longer letting things build. You are honoring whatever comes up in the present moment. This also changes how you relate to other people. You become less reactive, but more precise. You don't need as much to happen externally to recognize a dynamic. And you don't stay in things as long once you see them clearly. That can feel unfamiliar at first because you are no longer relying on escalation to confirm what you are sensing. You are trusting the initial recognition. And that's where the real shift happens. Not in how you handle the reaction, but in whether you stay aligned with what you already know. And when healing from CPTSD, it is so important that we come back to ourselves, remain with ourselves, no matter what someone says, how they might push back on our boundaries, how they might question us, how they might react. It doesn't matter. We stay aligned with ourselves, and that is when we know we are healing. It doesn't mean that you're wrong if you feel something come up. Stay with it. Stay with it. That is the place to look, not to fix it, just to see it clearly. If you want support working with that without overriding it or forcing a response, I work with people one-on-one. You can find the link in the description. Until next time, I am Kat Grace. Thank you for being here. Namaste.